Welcome everyone, a small but excellent crowd. Today's session is the first of some shared sessions that are going on this week with people from all different disciplines. We're also recording the session today, so we can share it with other ECRs who can't be here with us in the room. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Dan Woodman. I'm a sociologist here and also president of the Council for Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences that is organised to get a bunch of different disciplines to hold events on campus this week, including our newest group that's taking part in the Congress this week, the SHAPE Futures Network. I won't say anything more about the network. I'll hand it over to the networkees, or whatever the right term is, the leadership of the group, who can tell us a little bit more about this important initiative about what the future looks like for our HASS, or I should say now SHAPE, early and mid-career scholars. Okay, over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. Welcome to those of you who are here. Hi, those of you who are watching the recording. This is a panel on the most pressing issues facing early and mid-career academics. I'm Rebecca and Nadine Welsh from UQ. I've tried to tone down my colour for Melbourne, but it's about as monochrome as I can get, I'm afraid. Of course, though, I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land that I'm honoured to be on today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And while I'm giving that acknowledgement of country, I'd like to express my support both personally as an Australian and also as a constitutional lawyer for the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and particularly the constitutional recognition of a First Nations voice to Parliament. What we're here today to talk to you about is something which is surprisingly under-researched, and that we hope our exciting new organisation will be able to kind of step in and start shining a light on. We are here representing the SHAPE Futures Network, which is a joint initiative of the Australian Academy of Humanities and the Australian Social Sciences Academy, the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia, sorry. And our purpose is to support, connect and represent early and mid-career researchers, EMCRs, in SHAPE disciplines. I'm going to talk a bit more about what a SHAPE discipline is, but we'll get there. So, as I said, I'm Associate Professor Rebecca and Nadine Welsh from Queensland. Also here today in person or by recording is Associate Professor Sarah Midford from La Trobe, Dr. Tully Barnett from where are you? Flinders. We've only met on Zoom before. And Georgia Stannard will be, she's in literally 2 places at once today and has recorded her presentation. This is a picture of our exec committee, our super dedicated group of early mid-career researchers from across the different kinds of SHAPE disciplines, who for the last year or so have been working on how we can best, what it is that early and mid-career researchers want in these disciplines and how we can best support, connect, advocate. So before going into what we've been doing, I think the first thing to do is start to understand why, which is what is the problem that we're facing. Now, to say that early and mid-career researchers in Australia face significant professional and personal challenges is probably not news to anyone in this room or on Zoom, and is a bit of a cliche even. It's likely everyone here is aware of the kinds of challenges that you face going through a PhD, going into any kind of postgraduate study, and then going into your career, whether that's in academia or a research career outside of academia. We all have stories that we share, whether it's kind of in the kitchen or in the coffee, on our coffee breaks, about egregious things, about frustrations, things that can be demoralising or exhausting. And those things that just kind of counterbalance and exist against those parts of the profession that we really love. There have been a handful of scholarly studies of the experiences of EMCRs in Australia. And knowing that we're all SHAPE discipline kind of people, it won't surprise you to know the first thing we did was a literature review. So a big nod to Dr. Tristan Moss from Griffith University. He's the one who did a lot of the work behind what I'm going to be speaking to. And you can read a great blog post from him on our website. So, what does the literature say? Well, the issues that face EMCRs in Australia, and I'm speaking broadly, not just about SHAPE or any particular discipline, are some of the things that are up on this slide: job security, overwork, lack of support, absence of opportunities, all of these things that you can see up there. And it's a really diverse array of problems: inclusivity, culture, family responsibilities. And also behind all this, a bit of an interaction of other more personal factors, things like background, the institution you're at, support from leadership, mentoring, the discipline that you're in and demands of that discipline, location, age, and more. One excellent study of 658 EMCRs in STEM found many were contemplating leaving academia for reasons like job insecurity, lack of support, and poor workplace culture. This supported wider studies that found a higher level of stress and lower job satisfaction in STEM EMCRs as opposed to those more senior. The Australian Academy of Science actually has an early and mid-career researcher kind of forum. It's called the EMCR Forum, and it's an organisation like what SHAPE Futures is becoming. And they've done quite a few really great studies in this area. So in 2016, they found that while most postdoctoral researchers aim to continue in academia, the majority of respondents did not think it was possible due to, again, structural challenges like job insecurity, lack of funding, and other responsibilities. Gender has been a big issue to emerge in the studies. Women reported taking on more parenting, career and caring responsibilities, but face systemic challenges to achieving all of these things. In 2020, the EMCR Forum, that's the STEM organisation, found that 25% of women were on casual contracts compared to just 6% of men. This brings us squarely, of course, to the pandemic. Needless to say, COVID impacted the experiences of EMCRs and only made a lot of these issues worse. For example, the gender disparity and those caring responsibilities. The EMCR Forum again found that 83% of respondents reported that workplace changes during the pandemic had made them less productive. And that's probably nothing that you guys need to be told. Poor government funding in key areas has again exacerbated these challenges even further. But a lot of this info comes from STEM studies. There's been a big focus on STEM and on sciences, and there is a gap in the research when it comes to SHAPE. Before I go to talk about that though, what is SHAPE and why are we saying SHAPE at a HASS Congress? So SHAPE is a term designed that comes out of England, it comes out of the UK. It's a joint initiative by the British Academy, the Arts Council, the Academy of Social Sciences, and the London School of Economics over there. And there's just some screenshots from the website up there to give you an idea of the kind of movement that's gathering steam in the UK. What it's designed to do is reinvigorate that idea of the humanities and social sciences discipline, to give it this kind of rebranding that puts it on par with STEM. And STEM and STEAM is something that we hear so much about, but we don't really hear nearly as much about SHAPE or HASS and social sciences. So it's a bit of a rebranding, but it means what you would expect it to mean. So it's all of those humanities and social sciences disciplines, society, politics, culture, sociology, anthropology, history, philosophy, education, psychology, languages, the arts, law, all of those are all swept up into this idea of SHAPE. And it's not about competing against STEM. It's about using this SHAPE STEM rebranding to show that the two are compatible and interdependent, that we need both as the world is progressing. So what about SHAPE EMCRs, to go back a step? Well, we know, I certainly have experienced, and I'm sure everyone has, what happens when you take things that are developed in STEM or developed in sciences and just try and plonk them down on top of shape disciplines. We know that it's not always a good fit and it doesn't always work. And there's a chance maybe that some of those challenges that are being faced by STEM researchers aren't being faced by shape researchers, or that we're facing different ones. At the moment, though, there's a gap in the research for this, which we all love a good gap in the research. So one thing we know is that EMCR difficulties aren't limited to STEM, that we are experiencing difficulties, that it's not all just clear sailing here. This quote is from a 2021 survey out of the Australian Historical Association survey of early career researchers. And I think it certainly rang bells for me and ECRs that I know. The second thing that we know is that there are very, very few actual focus studies on this. So once we've done our literature review, of course, the next thing we did was go and get ethics approval and design our own survey. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who will talk about what our survey has been finding.
Thank you, Beck. And I'd like to also acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So, yeah, we started a survey. And to date, we've had 84 responses. So this is also a call for more responses because the bigger the data set, the more accurate our representation of EMCRs can be in our research. We asked the questions, what are the most pressing issues facing early and mid-career academics in the survey in various ways. We tried to get a demographic idea as well, and I'll go through the results that we've got to date in just a second. But yeah, if you identify as an EMCR and you haven't yet filled out the survey, then this is a call to action for you to do so, so that we can represent the group adequately, because we're new to this space and this space hasn't had representation in the past. So it's important that we get it right. So basically what we've got to date, I'm going to paint a profile of who has responded. It is a 41-year-old female from the east coast of Australia who lives in a metropolitan area. She is likely to be a first-in-family PhD, but not a first-in-family to university. There would have likely been some relocation involved in her employment, and her employment is in fact full-time and either ongoing or in a contract role at a university in the higher education sector. So this is a problem for the research that we are trying to conduct, because at the moment what we're capturing is people who are in steady jobs in that higher education sector. And what we want is to have a broader picture of those that identify as EMCRs, so that we can advocate not for the people who are in secure employment, but also for the people who are in more precarious employment, or perhaps have other ones that have given up, and perhaps get their insight into how things could be improved, and maybe welcome them back in the fold, or they can just use their insight for the next generation. You can see also that the highest qualification is largely a PhD, but we also have representation from people who identify as early or mid-career researchers with different qualifications or overlapping qualifications. Most of them are it's fairly balanced actually. So far we've got almost half of ECRs and MCRs and a couple of research high degree candidates. But basically, it's not a very representative group at the moment, and we would like it to be more representative. It doesn't mean that what we've got isn't interesting data though. So I'm going to present a little bit of it to you today, and it basically resonates really strongly with what Beck presented about EMCRs in general, but also the STEM surveys that have been conducted. So when we asked what are the most important challenges facing SHAPE EMCRs, the four top responses, the people So it was a list where people could sort of rank, but the ones that resoundingly came out on top was a lack of employment opportunities, unfair, too high workload, unclear pathways, and the scope and availability of funding opportunities. And you can see there's some really choice quotes here. So there's a lack of funding in the humanities. There's a high level expectation of volunteering. So we're sort of expected to give away our time for free, which, you know, in a role like the three of us are in here presenting today, we do a lot of that. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing that, but also if you're in precarious employment, that becomes really difficult. And I'm not, so I'm in a privileged position to be able to volunteer my time in a different way to someone in precarious employment. So that creates challenges for people trying to break in. And yeah, there's a need to make lasting connections with stakeholders when you're an early and mid-career researcher, but employment contracts are increasingly short-term. And so how do you build lasting relationships that will sort of further your research goals if you have a finite period of time? And certainly when I was on contracts, one of the things that was always difficult was I wasn't entitled to university funding because my contract wasn't long enough to be included in internal grant schemes and things like that. So that means that even institutionally you're not included. So there's some real challenges that exist in the EMCR space that are emerging in our survey, and we'd love to hear more about what your experiences are so that we can work on those as well. So EMCR specific challenges that have come out in the data so far is and I've just chosen one because it was like really well illustrated in the qualitative comments. So job insecurity is a big one for the people who've responded so far. Here's some quotes. It's phenomenally difficult to invest time into long-term research projects when you're on semester by semester casual contracts without any research allocation. And that speaks to a move in the sector to teaching focused positions rather than teaching research splits. And the result is that EMCRs are saying things like a 5-year career plan is basically impossible. So there's this lack of hope that exists in the space at the moment. And literally said out loud, a sense of hopelessness. How long do I hang on, keep researching in my own time when there appears to be little or no prospect of work or a career in my field? It's a depressing place to start, but it's also a place full of opportunities for us as a group. So we want this kind of information because and Tali's going to pick up on this, when we do submit things to try and change policy or sit down at round tables, we need this kind of data to present to people. So SHAPE specific challenges. The broad attitude to SHAPE culturally is coming through in the survey results. So this idea that funding is not as readily available in SHAPE disciplines as it is in STEM disciplines, basically. There is this, even though we're not trying to set ourselves up as a competitor to STEM with this group, there is culturally, because STEM has had a name for so long, there is this sort of tendency towards it in big conversations, government level conversations. Another person says the government is hostile to our disciplines. There's this idea that perhaps there's an active role in trying to not give us the funding. Research funding and allocation are clearly designed with the sciences in mind. So without a dedicated humanities and social sciences funding body, we're at a massive disadvantage. And that's exactly what Beck was saying. There's this kind of infrastructure that exists that's being superimposed onto SHAPE disciplines. But why shouldn't we have different opportunities, or opportunities that are built for us and not superimposed from a sector that operates differently, or a set of disciplines that operates differently. And there's this final quote here: I don't feel secure in my employment because the humanities aren't secure. Institutions prioritise STEM areas in the research priorities. HASS projects do not get funded at the same rate. So the ARC would probably not agree with that, and certainly their statistics indicate that, but we don't have an NHMRC either. So there are systemic issues with funding in HASS disciplines, in SHAPE disciplines, and our EMCRs are recognising those, and they're facing the challenges of precarious employment as a result of those inequities. So what's our role? What are we going to do about it? We're going to act as a voice based on the responses that we have had to this survey and what our members ask of us going forward. So sign up to be a member, ask us questions, ask us to do things, because we want to advocate for better EMCR outcomes. And we want to provide resources that will help you beyond your institutions that are specifically aimed at EMCRs in SHAPE disciplines. And more than anything, we want to provide somewhere for you to connect safely with people who are going through the same challenges, to support you to go through those challenges, to try to change those challenges into opportunities, and to try and shift the way that SHAPE exists in an Australian context. So I'm going to hand over to Tully now, who's going to talk about policy.
Thanks. So you've heard a little bit about where the SHAPE network, SHAPE Futures network has come from, what its membership base is, how we're trying to gather some membership steam in order to be truly representative across the space. But one of the main things that we want to be achieving in the next little while is to respond to any opportunities for making policy submissions, for having the work of the SHAPE Futures Network and the membership base that it represents heard, have our voices heard where there is any opportunity for change. And so luckily for us at the moment, there is some opportunities for some of that work. So we want to be contributing to those submission and consultation processes, offer advice to any relevant bodies wherever the opportunity allows, ask PIC bodies and disciplinary bodies difficult questions about the extent to which the early and mid-career researchers in there is taken into account in the work that they do as well. So that representation work occurs across a range of different perspectives and opportunities, and the survey again is really important space for us to be making sure, calibrating our intuition, our sense about what the big issues are, and making sure that they are the ones that are the most pressing, hence the title of this session, for the broader humanities, arts and social sciences, or social sciences, humanities, arts for people and the environment, which is what SHAPE stands for, going forward. So that survey really helps us do some of that work. But also the network has a role to share that information in really useful ways. So on the one hand, we want to cohere and create that network where people come together to share their sense of their experience in the sector, but then also create the opportunity for us to turn that back to the sector more broadly in order to make sure that those issues are understood beyond our own network. So that is about sharing the knowledge and diversity outwards to where we think it's so badly needed. So on the one hand, that is to the two academies that support the SHAPE Futures Network, so the Academy of the Humanities and the Academy of the Social Sciences in Australia, to other PIC bodies, disciplinary associations, who all have very different relationships to and representations of early and mid-career researchers in their cohorts, in their mix, but also and most pressingly right now to government as well. So I really want to draw your attention to a webinar that was hosted recently by our leader, Mel Day, with Kylie Brass from the Academy of the Humanities and Chris Hatherley from the Academy of the Social Sciences, where they covered a whole bunch of topics around planning for policy change, evidence and data collection for understanding the sector better and making that information understood more broadly across, the importance of the narrative that we tell as a story about our sector to those different environments, and how that narrative may be changed, or the prism through which that narrative is understood may be changed slightly depending on the audience that we're trying to talk to. And so there are a range of different ways that we are going to be able to be having our voice heard in the near future. And the most important one that's coming out right now is the review of the Australian Research Council, which closes on the 14th of December. And so every disciplinary peak body and every sector peak body will be putting in a submission to this. And so we are doing several things in relation to this, one of which, of course, is that we're putting in our own submission. We're guided in the form of that submission by the information that we are gleaning from the survey as we analyse that data, and as we take those voices on board in our work. But also we are talking to other peak bodies about what obligations they have to the early and mid-career researchers in the HASS or SHAPE disciplines for their own submissions, and to not let that voice and experience of the early and mid-career researcher get lost. That's important for every consultation process that the sector puts in, but I think in particular it is a really important one for this Australian Research Council review, because there are a lot of very strong opinions in the sector amongst our colleagues who are early and mid-career researchers in HASS disciplines towards the ARC, and this is the opportunity to have some of those opinions heard at that national and political level at a moment where change is possible. So I will implore you, please, to get in touch with us to do the survey, but also to get in touch with us about any particular issues that you think we really should represent in that consultation process, in our submission, because we will be drafting it right up until that 14th of December deadline and want to make sure that it is representative. But that's not the only way that we will be having a policy advocacy voice. We have a policy response subcommittee in SHAPE Futures. I'm currently chairing that committee, and we will be looking for any opportunity to get that early and mid-career researcher voice heard in any of those environments. But we'll also be honing our own skills around policy response at the same time. So that's why the webinar from the two academies was really useful for us in giving us some of those tips about policy responses, about crafting the narrative, about being ready to pounce when an opportunity comes up. So to have the narrative, the perspective, and the three points ready to go whenever those opportunities arise, to be able to speak to not only the minister that you might find yourself in an elevator with, giving them the pitch, but several steps down river as well, the people who are going to be in those spaces with decision makers, and making sure that they don't forget that the issues, the values, and the situation of the early career and mid-career researchers in the HASS communities that are so pressing, and yet seem to be so easily forgotten when those conversations happen. So things like the fact that from my perspective, it is the early career and mid-career researchers in HASS who were most susceptible to the vetoing of ARC grants. If you look at the list of grants that have been vetoed, it is very much early and mid-career researchers, and it's very much felt by the HASS community. So I think that that's a really important role that SHAPE Futures can take up in this particular submission. Similarly, I think how our grants system is structured to be of use, particularly the DECRA, and I have been a DECRA fellow myself, so particularly the role that scheme plays in creating trajectories from PhD to academic career needs to be thought through closely, I think, and this is an opportunity for us to make some key points there about how an ARC can better represent early and mid-career researchers in HASS. That's all for me, but now I'm turning over to Georgia, who has some...
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Georgia Stannard, and I am the Professional Bodies Liaison Officer for the SHAPE Futures Network. So I wanted to start by giving you an overview of how we here at SHAPE Futures define an EMCR. So we've taken a very broad approach to the definition of EMCR here at SHAPE Futures, and this includes anyone who self-identifies as an early or mid-career researcher, and this is typically up to 15 years post-PhD and does include career interruptions. So that self-identification is a very important aspect to how we've defined EMCRs here, and largely how my role fits into the broader network. So many of us, I'm sure, will think of researcher and immediately make that mental link with the academia. But there are, I'm sure as you might know some of your colleagues, many people with PhDs who are still doing research but are doing that within a different professional capacity. So some great examples are anthropologists working for registered Aboriginal parties and co-publishing their research with traditional custodians. Could be historians working for the City of Melbourne to write reports and publish their data on the development of Melbourne, maybe even producing data to feed into outstanding documentaries. Could even be an archaeologist like myself who now works for a not-for-profit organisation at the National Trust. So there are lots of ways in which researchers are actively doing research, but that falls outside of academia. And this is part of how we then define researcher. And that has been interpreted really broadly. So we really feel that research includes those people who are doing, yes, research and teaching academics, but also professionals and practice-focused individuals, both within and outside of academia. So we have many early and mid-career researchers working in a variety of fields in industry and community, and we are explicitly including these individuals as part of our network. We feel it's really important to have a broad sense of all of the problems that EMCRs are facing, no matter if they are in academia or if they are working outside. Many of us, I'm sure, as I did myself over COVID, really rethought how we are approaching our research careers. And I know many of my colleagues have diversified how we are wanting to achieve our career goals. And for me, I found that outside of academia in working for a not-for-profit. So when we are doing our policy and the survey that has been previously mentioned, we're really targeting this really broad range of researchers across Australia to try and give us a sense of what are those really broad issues that people are facing, how are our industries diversifying to incorporate research in lots of different ways, and how can we as an EMCR network support our colleagues both in and outside of academia. So if you do know of any colleagues who are working outside of academia at the moment, who would fall into that EMCR category of being post-PhD, within 15 years post-PhD, and who might self-identify or might consider reassessing their self-identification as an EMCR, we would strongly encourage you to send them perhaps a link to our website, encourage them to do our survey, and to get in contact with us so that we can hear about what some of their concerns are and how we can better support them.
Okay, so that's us. We are yet to launch officially. I was just saying before, it's a bit like a PhD. You kind of, you hand it in 15 times before you actually get to go, this is us. So I guess this presentation itself is part of our launch activities, but the official launch of the network will be online on the 9th of December. So please come along. It's all online, register for that. And you can hear from the rest of us and all about what we're doing. And have we mentioned we're doing a survey? We're doing a survey. So that QR code will take you through to the survey. And there's our website there where we have already blog posts and things for you to kind of surf around. And please share it with your networks. SHAPE, and thank you, Tully, for saying what SHAPE actually stands for. I managed to explain what SHAPE is, but never saying social sciences, humanities, arts, people and the environment. There's a lot of disciplines in that. And so the more reach we can get, the better. But just send people over to the website. Tell us what you'd like us to be doing. We're in our infancy as a network, and we're here to be a ground up kind of thing. We don't have all the answers, if that's not already obvious. On that note, opening it up to you guys, do you have any questions or anything that you'd like to talk about this morning? Yeah.
Yeah, can I ask 2 questions?
Does he have to talk into a microphone, or is it?
I think if you speak clearly, it'll pick it up.
Great.
So my first question here, it's more a comment. It's about the survey, and I'm part of the postgraduate subcommittee from the Australian Sociological Association.
Oh, great.
We're running the postgraduate day. And I was wondering where you've been distributing this survey, and if by any chance Sally from TASA has been distributing these surveys among postgraduate students, because we would be really happy to make sure that this service goes across. I think it's a great opportunity, or even if you're able to, I mean, we have an agenda for tomorrow, but we have 85 students attending the session. And from what I can see, you want more numbers. So it could be a great opportunity to get in touch with TASA, with Sally, and make sure that this service goes across. That's one comment. And yeah, I mean,
thank you. I think it's all we can do.
That's right. We'll follow up on that. Sure.
Yeah.
We did reach out, but what happened with that reach out? We may not have reached out to the right people.
In TASA newsletter.
Great.
Did it go up?
No, so one of Georgia's kind of things as and it's been fantastic having Georgia on the committee, because she's reminded us all to get out of the just my university is all that exists. She's reached out to as many kind of associations that she could come up with, but there's a lot, and there's every chance that we miss someone, and there's probably a higher chance that in getting an email from another place.
Well, yeah, we have a weekly newsletter that goes across Australia to all postgraduates, and I'm sure that you could include, if you email Sally, she could include the link there.
Awesome.
And the other question is, you did say that the purpose of SHAPE is to try to spread these narratives in different environments. I was wondering, I mean, what's your capacity in terms of elevating these issues? I mean, do you have consultancy work with other major entities across Australia? Where can you put our claims up? I mean, where
Great.
Yes.
So we've just started. So, we were in the Campus Morning Mail, so we're real. But so to start with, we're already being included in the 2 academies who are calling for interest in their submissions to for example, the ARC consultation review. So we're being invited to participate in those discussions, which lead to their own submissions as well as our submission. And that is the kind of thing that I think will continue to happen. The more that we make noise, the more that we will just remind professors that there are diverse levels of staff in and early career researchers and mid-career researchers in this space, and so we will be invited more and more to the table in those situations. I think a moment of challenge for us and for many early and mid-career researchers is the current destabilization around social media and what is the future of Twitter going to be, because I expect a year ago, that would have been our main way of making space for SHAPE EMCRs, right? And now I'm not sure that that's there. So I think that now we have to be a little bit more clever in making sure that we get into the TASA newsletter, for example, in order to make sure that that voice is heard and that we are thought of in the moment where action can happen, rather than just, you know, in general. There's our website.
Yeah, or even, I mean, or even databases from universities, because we also try to do the same, spread our messages as PG representatives to different PG students, and we know that sometimes it's limited to Twitter or social media, but also accessing to databases from universities, try to go that way, you get a lot of students.
Yeah.
And I would say that if you know of any people that we haven't reached based on our knowledge, that you tell us that we should be reaching you, and that's being said out to camera as well as to the room, because we can add you to our database and make sure that you are getting that direct messaging to go in newsletters and things like that. But if we may not have reached out to the right people when we did that initial push.
I think sorry, I know there's another question, but very quickly, the relationship between us and the academies of social sciences and of humanities has been really positive. So we're created because they knew they had an EMCR problem. Like, they were having great discussions. They have a seat at the table, but they are not an academy of EMCRs. They're an academy of not even all professors. So they kind of invited us to form. They give us a lot of support and also give us all the rope we need. So I think they have a seat at the table, which makes us confident about our seat at the table. And I sound way more optimistic than I ever do in any presentation. They don't try and control what we say at all. They're genuinely interested in us coming up with things. And I feel like if we challenged them, they wouldn't tell us, oh, you can't say that. Like, it's a very good relationship. So
I agree, but I also just want to make sure that our network doesn't end there, but actually has its own relationships with those other peak bodies as well, and the disciplinary bodies, and the things that don't get pick up to, or don't identify with, or don't think that Academy of the Humanities or the Academy of the Social Sciences is relevant to them. So there's a whole scope of people that aren't the sciences or health, but aren't necessarily captured in those two academies either. So we're trying to do everything, but let us know what we can do better, I think, is the take-home message.
Sorry, did you have a question?
Oh, I'm Penny Feaster from the Australian Research Data Commons. Happy to be here and very happy to see the Emergence Network. But, you know, if there's any way that I can help in my role as the HASS Research Data Commons Program Manager, one thing that the ARDC does really well is communications. And I guess you're only hitting a portion of, you know, just a wedge, but if we can support you by putting your survey link into our newsletter or in any other way, then Tony knows where it's going to be.
That'll be great. So just for the record, that was Jenny Fuster from ARDC, and she's right when she says that one of the great things that they do is communications. But also, I think that there could be a role for early and mid-career SHAPE researchers in the current discussions around cultural infrastructure, digital cultural infrastructure that ARDC is leading. So I think great.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. I come from the UK and moved to Australia, and some of the things that you mentioned about the most pressing issues were material working conditions. And in the UK, it's the union, the UCU, that has taken the lead on that, and casualisation and workload are two of the major demands that they're trying to address. So my question is, what's your relationship going to do with the NTEU in Australia?
That's a great question.
Good question.
It's a great question because we don't have a good answer, but we take that and we'll create an answer to it. So yes, solidarity to the UCU, who is on strike in many places in the UK right now. You know, do either of you have a good answer to give?
It's something that has come up in our meetings and things, and we know we cover the same issues as the NTU because they're issues that UMCRs are experiencing. So we're going to, so hopefully we are thinking about the same issues, but our role is obviously different. We're not going to be running any, funding any law cases or saying people should go on strike. What we will have is a different kind of, we'll hopefully have a seat at the table just like they do. So another voice fighting for the same issues, but there's an overlap there, it's going to be.
And I think another thing we can do is make sure that our findings of our survey and data is accessible to the NTU and is usable by them in any work that they do. So I'll make sure that they have the same.
Thank you all for your brilliant work and the time and commitment you've put into getting SHAPE Futures off the ground and running. Your distinction between the sorry, my name is Humana, I'm a postgraduate researcher here at Melbourne. The distinction between the ways in which STEM is supporting ECRs and EMCRs and the fact that those strategies can just be blindly lumped into HASS, I completely agree with, and I'm really glad you touched on that. I think it's very important and it's timely that a group such as SHAPE is addressing that. But I guess I just had a general thought bubble that sits on the other side of that coin, which is that, at least in my experience in Australia, in the Australian context, interdisciplinary research being done by ECRs is kind of fetishized. The rhetoric finds its way into more or less branding exercises that universities construct. But at a substantive level, it doesn't seem to me that this country truly supports what it means, like literally to be doing interdisciplinary research. Those who have established careers and tenure can do it and do it kind of as a flourish or on the side, but a lot of the more avant-garde interdisciplinary research is being done by ECRs because they're the ones who are having to respond to these new impulses and try and, diversify and give them sort of distinctive kind of career profile. But when it comes to the support that is needed to make sure that that can continue, I feel like there's a disconnect. There's a kind of chasm between the fantasy of interdisciplinarity and what it means to truly recognise someone who's doing it. Because, again, in my experience at an ECR level, you're rewarded and encouraged to do that kind of work, but simultaneously you're expected to maintain the same career profile as someone in your discipline who has been incredibly narrow and specific at the same time. So yeah, could you please just solve that?
Can you please write all of that down in the slide? So there is a can of worms there, and yes, if you guys will.
Just to say that I think that that is an element to be addressed in the in our submission to the ARC review, which is to ask for a recognition that the workload that is required to to establish track record in more than one field means that interdisciplinary researchers are doing double the workload. Similarly, I would argue the creative arts researchers in our fields are doing double the workload because they have to do the practice and then make it understandable to traditional researchers, which is a complicated set of tasks.
And then somehow sell it on your next promotion application or your application for a job that you're not just a watered down story.
Exactly, pick one or the other and emphasize that. I mean, Europe is a good example in that the ERC is very supportive of it, and you get that reflected in the job ads, which is to say that, all of these things are fully encouraged rather than a token dot point that says interdisciplinary researchers valued, but then you actually have to pick which disciplinary field.
Yeah, even structurally in a grant application through the ARC, you have to pitch to an FOR code, right? So you're instantly actually needing to be disciplinary in order to get funding. And so I as an interdisciplinary researcher myself, I completely understand the problem and the fact that you have to sort of have two very solid disciplines that you can you either go one way or the other, depending on what the funding source is. And that's not right. And that's not how new research happens. It's a very old way of thinking about things that needs to be thought about differently. So we will take that on board for sure.
One thing we haven't talked about because we're not fully launched yet and we're not doing it, is the connect part of our kind of mandate. So we talked about issues of understanding issues facing EMCRs and advocacy, because we can't wait till after the 14th of December and go, oh, well, now we're going to start. But in terms of where the organisation will go, there is that capacity to connect people across SHAPE disciplines and maybe help interdisciplinary research that way, whether it's understanding the challenges that it faces or just helping it happen. So any suggestion, at the moment we're ground up, so the suggestions really are taken on board in how the organisation even looks and communicates. Thanks.
There's probably much time for one more question if there is one, but otherwise it might be a perfect time to
say thank you for coming along. A good audience, if not the hugest audience. Some great questions and some excellent answers. One of the roles of this Congress is to bring different disciplines associations together, so we can think about how we won't exactly speak with one voice, but work with each other to speak coherently about not just the value, but how essential what I was going to say HASS disciplines, or maybe I should say SHAPE research is to the future of this country, and looking after earlier and mid-career researchers, how we're going to have the capacity to do that future research. So thank you to the audience, thank you to our panel, thanks for being part of the Congress, and thank you to our viewers out there watching this video later on. If the survey is still live, get on there and do that, and if not, get involved with the SHAPE Futures Network. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.